Hello everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to be studying the book of Daniel, the first four chapters. Daniel, the first four chapters. And instead of doing some scribbling today that you can hardly read, Miss Jody has cut out these things for me that we'll talk about as we go along. And so especially if you have one piece of paper that you can write something on, that will be really, really helpful for you. Really helpful. Most of us are real familiar with the first four chapters of the book of Daniel. Actually, the first six. But today we're talking about the first four. You know, Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, who were renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are really powerful stories for young people as well as for older people. The stories are just as important for every age group. Nebuchadnezzar, who is the ruling general, the ruling king of Babylon, goes to Jerusalem and just destroys Jerusalem and ransacks everything that is good and brings back home all those who look like they can help him. Now, what would happen when an invading general would go into a land to conquer is they'd bring back what they perceive to be those who are connected to royalty, or those who they thought were very talented, or those who they thought were very intellectual or smart. And the people that were poor and that did not seem as bright, they kind of consider them the dregs, the lower echelon, just short of just being scum. And so they didn't bother them a lot, nor did they bother much of their possessions because they really had none. But they would also bring back as their own reward for conquering all the precious things, things of value that the nation they're conquering possessed. And if any of those who have been taken captive were to be brought back, it was because those who were left could scrounge or gather enough wherewithal, money or whatever, to go and to buy them back. So now then, Nebuchadnezzar has gone to Jerusalem and he has just really destroyed Jerusalem. And he's brought back Daniel and his three friends. Notice the commentary of what he says about them. He says in verse 4, young men in whom there was no blemish, good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. You see what I was saying? Here, because they were good looking, they thought they could be taught, they thought they would possess knowledge. Because they were good looking, they thought they could use them. I guess if they'd been ugly as dirt, they might not have paid much attention to them. But because there's no blemish, they were good looking, they thought, okay, these are some guys that can serve in the palace. And by the way, you didn't want those people they left behind considered as scum to serve in the palace. They were not attractive enough. They did not have enough to really be winsome or draw people to them. So it does say something about Daniel and his three friends about how they could attract the attention of people. Now sometimes that can be negative, but for Daniel and his three friends, it's going to turn out to be a positive. Well, Daniel and his three friends are there, and they're going to fatten them up as it is. And when they bring the food and the drink to fatten them up, I'm just paraphrasing this. I'm kind of doing this from the book of Ricky here. They said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to eat that. I tell you what, you give us 10 days, we'll eat vegetables, and you come back and see if we're not healthy. And so Ashpenaz, who was the guard that was placed over, said, look, guys, if something happens to you, I'm a dead man. My head's going to be chopped off. You can't be doing this. And Daniel says, well, you're just going to trust me. But notice in verse 8, there was something that's significant that I think is a key to the success of Daniel and his three friends. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Notice the first part. Daniel had purposed in his heart he would not defile himself. Now, we don't know exactly the age of Daniel and Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, but it is thought that they're somewhere around the ages of 14 to 16 years old. And now then, they're taken captive. Their mamas and daddies aren't there. There's nobody there to watch over them. There's nobody there to protect them. These young men are, as it were, out on their own. And notice the kind of heart they had. It said, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies or the king's drink. Well, for us, it might not be the king's delicacies and the king's drink, but there's an important and powerful principle here. And that is, Daniel had determined he would not do this. Daniel had already purposed in his heart, as well as Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. They'd already determined not to do this. So when they come to this isn't something, okay, they're going to have to think about. So let me pause just a moment and make this point as powerful and as important as I can make it, emphatic. Begin young to determine you're going to do what's right regardless of what the cost is. I don't know everything you're going to be faced with in life. I don't know everything I'm going to be faced with in life going forward. But it really doesn't matter if what I have already done is purposed in my heart. Whatever the options, I'm going to do what is right. And when I say do what is right, I mean do what is right pleasing to God, not what is right pleasing to me. Daniel had purposed in his heart. He'd already determined he's not going to defile himself. And we have to have that same attitude. We have to be determined we're not going to defile ourselves. Here Daniel's in Babylon, but he doesn't act like people in Babylon. He's not going to do the things they do. And so there's some things we can't participate in. There's some words we can't speak. There's some movies we can't see. There's a way we can't dress. They're just some activities and behaviors and attitudes that the world has that we can't do. And just because Daniel's in Babylon, he doesn't forget everything he learned before and throw it away and say, well, nobody's going to know it. Nobody's going to care. Okay, I'm here. I'll just go along to get along with the king here. And Daniel said, no, I'm not going to do that. But it wasn't a decision he made in that moment. It was a decision he had already made. If we wait until the moment comes to make the decision when we're challenged, we'll make a decision. But it will be a decision born of emotion, not a decision that's a byproduct of reason and thought and deep faith. And that's what you see in Daniel. What you see in Daniel is integrity, devotion, loyalty, and compassion. And that's what you see with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as well. And so there are just some things we can't do. There's some things we're going to have to say no to. Now, yes, there's a lot of things we can say yes to. But there's some things we're just not going to be able to say yes to. We're going to have to say no. And when that happens, our integrity is going to be tested. Our devotion is going to be tested. When I say our integrity, what that means is I'm going to do what is right because God's looking, whether anybody else is looking or not. And I'm going to remain loyal. I'm not going to walk away from God. But notice Daniel also had compassion on Ashpenaz. And he said, well, he didn't say, well, tough cookies on you. If we don't, then okay, that's your life. We're not worried about that. He said, listen, trust me. Trust me and trust my God. And sure enough, when he came back, Daniel and his three friends were a whole lot better off than the people were who had eaten the king's meat and drank the king's drink. So Daniel chapter 1 is really an important chapter for us. We come to chapter 2, and here's here's a powerful chapter that I think is really instructive for us as well. Nebuchadnezzar had this dream and it troubles him. So he calls all the fellows that will interpret his dream, and he tells them, tell me my dream and tell me what it means. And they said, well, if you tell us your dream, we'll tell you what it means. He said, no, we're not going to play that game. I told you, you tell me the dream that I had, and then you tell me what it means. And they said, well, we can't do that. Well, enter Daniel. Daniel comes and he says, okay, Nebuchadnezzar, here's the dream you had. You had a dream that there was a head made of gold. And that head made of gold represents you. You had a dream with chest arms made of silver, and that represented Persia. And yet Persia is not even a threat now yet. And you have belly and thigh made of bronze, and that represented Greece, Alexander the Great. That is way out yet. And then you had a dream with legs made of iron that represents the Roman Empire. And then you had feet made of iron and clay that represented the divided Roman Empire. Rome's going to be powerful, but they're going to be divided. And then you had a rock, and that represented the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Oh, wait a minute. What's this kingdom of Jesus Christ business? What's that about? Nebuchadnezzar doesn't know, nor does anybody else there understand it. They barely get Persia, and I'm not even sure they get Greece because those are so far in the future here. So here he interprets that dream. And basically what he's telling Nebuchadnezzar in that dream is, you're not going to rule forever, big boy. You think you're strong and mighty now. And Nebuchadnezzar was probably the greatest general at that time among the pagan nations. I mean, he built walls, he built cities, he conquered, and he was a brutal man when he went to conquer. But notice in chapter 2, what Nebuchadnezzar's response to that is. Verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, bowed before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. The king answered Daniel and said, truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, and the revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. I doubt if Nebuchadnezzar was prone to listen to anybody else. I doubt if Nebuchadnezzar was inclined to ask anybody for advice. But Daniel comes, and he tells him his dream, and he tells him the interpretation of the dream. And Nebuchadnezzar then praises the God of Daniel. Now he says the God of gods. He's not recognizing Jehovah as the sovereign God. He said, among all the gods, yours is the God of gods. And among all the lords and kings, yours is the Lord of the kings. Of all the gods, your God's the highest, but there's still a lot of gods. So he still hasn't come to grips with the fact that Jehovah is, who is the I am, is sovereign. That is, there's none higher or greater than him. But notice, the king's response to Daniel was that he at least began to recognize something about Daniel's God. And again, that emphasizes Daniel's integrity, his devotion, his loyalty, his compassion. Now, this is what I want you to write on your paper. I want you to write integrity, loyalty, devotion, and compassion. Because that's what Daniel represents. Those are the attributes that Daniel represents. Well, we come to chapter 3. And we know chapter 3 by the fact that here Nebuchadnezzar makes this big statue. And he tells all of his people to bow down before it when they hear all the music play. And keep in mind, these are all Chaldeans here. And you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, their Hebrew names. You have them out there, and they're going to stick out like a sore thumb because they're not the same nationality. Now, let me back up to something else real quick before I proceed. Notice the names were changed. Why? Well, they felt like if they could change their names, their identity, they could change them. Remember back in chapter 1, they said, we can teach them. Look back at chapter 1 again at what is said there in verse 4. Young men in whom there was no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, and quick to understand, and who had the ability to serve in the king's palace, and who they might teach the language and the literature of the Chaldeans. When he says the language and literature, that's the lifestyle. We're going to teach them the lifestyle. We're going to teach them to be Chaldeans. And the beginning of that is, we're going to change your name. We're going to change your identity. You know, I'm told that when a person goes into the military, especially the Marines, the first thing they have to do is break them of their identity to give them a new identity to be a Marine. Because they want them to be part of what that brotherhood of Marines, what they really are. And here Nebuchadnezzar realizes to break these young men, we've got to break their identity. They're no longer going to be Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. They're going to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were pagan names. And we give them pagan names, we'll change their identity, and we can teach them the Chaldean way. We can teach them the language, and we can teach them literature. We can teach them the way of life. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar is trying to do with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so you hear this massive crowd here, and the horn sounds, and everybody bows down to this graven image that Nebuchadnezzar has. Here's this graven image here. They bow down before the graven image. And these three Hebrew boys don't bow down. And then somebody tattletales on them. And I'm just kind of playing with this here with you. Nebuchadnezzar calls and says, okay, boys, you're good boys. I know. You're good looking. You're smart. You know how this works. Maybe you just overplayed your hand here. Maybe you just missed the sound of the horn. Maybe you didn't get the message real well. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you another chance. Maybe you didn't mean well, and so I'll give a pass this time. And what is their response? Look in chapter 3, beginning verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that's the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning of the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. And basically they said, no, King Nebuchadnezzar, we didn't overplay our hands. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Remember, as with Daniel, they had decided not to defile their heart. That wasn't just Daniel. These three men have been with Daniel. They decided what they're going to do. And they already know they're going to do what's right, and they're not going to bow down before the God that Nebuchadnezzar has created. And they said, our God is able. Not only is he powerful, he's able enough to deliver us. But if he's not, we're still going to do what's right. We're not going to bow down before your God. And so Nebuchadnezzar commands them to be put in the fire and heated 7 times hot. Now just pause. They know they're going into the fire. That fire is there, and it's going to be 7 times hotter. It's going to be hotter than hot. It's going to be hot, 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 hot. It's going to be hot. And they probably can feel the heat coming off that fire. And instead of saying, well, okay, we want to rethink this. Maybe we were a little bit too insistent. Maybe we didn't recognize the seriousness of this. Can we have another conversation, King Nebuchadnezzar? Because, okay, we see how hot that fire is, and okay, we'll bow down before your gods. That's not what they do, is it? They don't do that, do they? They still don't bow down. And they're put in the fire, and guess who's killed in the fire? It's the guys putting them in the fire. And then it says that they saw one that looked like, verse 25, they saw a fourth. Nebuchadnezzar said, didn't we put 3? And they saw a fourth that looks like the Son of God. What you saw is God is able to deliver them. They said, our God is able, and God is protecting them. Our God is there. One like the Son of God. Here's one like the Son of God. God sent this. If it's his Son, he sent his Son to spare them. If it was a helper, God sent a helper to help them. And they're there, and they come out, and they don't smell like they're burned at all. There's not a hair singe. The clothes are not singed. They're not burned at all. They're not touched by it. That's impressive. And by the way, that gets Nebuchadnezzar's attention too. Look at verse 26 of chapter 3. The Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. Verse 25, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word, yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their God. And so he says, verse 29, I make a decree that anyone, any people, nation, or language who speaks anything against the God of Nebuchadnezzar, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their house shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like their God. Now again, I'm still not sure Nebuchadnezzar gets the point that their God is sovereign, but they're getting the point that their God is great. Here, Daniel has told the dream, and he said, your God is the God of gods. And now he has seen these three men, young men, spared, and said, your God is great, and if anybody curses your God, they're going to answer to me. They're going to be cut in pieces. That's pretty powerful. Do you see what their integrity, their loyalty, their devotion, and their compassion? Do you see what that produced? It produced in the heart of old Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, a hard-hearted guy. It produced in his heart a softness, and recognized how great the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are. And see, you see what's happening? Instead of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being adapted to the culture of the Chaldeans, Nebuchadnezzar's heart is being changed to the God of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Who's being educated here? Who's learning the literature? Who's learning the way of life? Nebuchadnezzar is. He's learning the way of life and the literature of Jehovah God as a result of Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. And what that says is, I don't care how young you are, you can still do what's right. You can still be loyal to God. You can still have devotion. And you can still have compassion. Those are not peculiar to age. Those are not age specific. These guys are young, just like some of you are young. And they're going to do what's right. Let me ask you, will you make a commitment that you're always going to try your best to do what is right? And when challenged to do what is wrong, you'll have the integrity, loyalty, and devotion to God that Nebuchadnezzar, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael had to God? Don't let someone else change your name and change your identity. Just because they're called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't stop being Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. That's who they are. And they don't walk away from their God. They stay true to their God. Well, chapter 4, I'm sorry I don't have a picture for it. So just stay with me as I tell the story. Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. Well, guess who he calls? He calls Daniel. And Daniel interprets his dream. And just kind of giving a summary of the story. It's about a tree. This tree grows. And the tree cut down. And so Daniel says, well, that dream you have about that tree growing and cutting down, that's you. Whoa, time out here. Hit the pause button. Daniel just told Nebuchadnezzar he's about to be cut down. Do you think Daniel was afraid of having his head cut off? You're fixing to go down, king. And not only that, there's something else that's going to happen to you. Notice it says in verse 32, they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be in the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen. 7 times shall pass over until you know the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he wills. And that very hour, while the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar, was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird claws. I don't know what the 7 times is. I think it is for a sufficient period of time. God is going to give a sufficient period of time that Nebuchadnezzar is basically going to take on the form of an animal. He's going to eat grass like an animal. He's going to have to do like an animal has when he wakes up in the morning. You're going to experience that. You're going down. You're going to be cut down. The tree's going to be cut, and there's going to be stump left, and you're going to be it. And not only that, you're going to eat like an animal. Nebuchadnezzar, you're fixing to learn that your pride is not where your power's at. You know, Nebuchadnezzar, he was strong. He had built walls. He built cities. He had really established things and been very advanced in his building and conquering people as well. But he can't defeat Jehovah. Whoa. Stop right there. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, our God is able. And here that able God not only saves them, that able God is going to teach Nebuchadnezzar a life lesson he's going to remember. It's his pride that's his problem. But notice what happens. Notice what happens as you come down to verse 36. At the same time, my reason returned to me, for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. My councils and nobles resorted to me. I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he's able to put down. Nebuchadnezzar got it. Now again, I'm not sure, I just don't know if Nebuchadnezzar at this point is really recognizing the sovereignty, the rule of God, that's the rule of God because he's God. But he's recognizing some powerful things about God. And what he recognizes is God is more powerful than a proud man. And God will destroy the proud man. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had no integrity. He wasn't loyal to God. He had no devotion to God. And he had no compassion on people. God said, okay, I'm going to teach you something. I'm going to teach you a lesson you're not going to forget. Do you think Daniel forgot that lesson? I don't think he forgot it. And so he says, notice again, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, and all whose works are truth, his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he's able to put down. How does Nebuchadnezzar know that? Because Nebuchadnezzar was put down. That's why. So let's kind of sum this up with reinforcing some takeaway lessons here. Number one, it doesn't matter who you are or where you are. We always have a choice to do what's right. The question is, will we make that choice? And not just then, will we make that choice beforehand? We're going to do what's right. And so God will help us prosper. The second thing is, even strong and powerful men need to know who God is. God interpreted the dream, and God brought Nebuchadnezzar to his knees, literally. They didn't know who God is. No man gets too big for God. And the man who thinks he's too big for God is going to be brought down low by God. And then from Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, it doesn't matter what names people call you. People can change your name, but you can still be a person of integrity, devotion, loyalty, and compassion. You can still be faithful to God. And God's going to have someone right there with you. Okay, it may not be an image that you see, but God's going to have someone with you. God will be with you. God will always be with you. And when people see us do what's right and withstand whatever threat we face, people will know who God is. I think Matthew 5:16 is really important. Let your light so shine that men may see your good works and glorify your God which is in heaven. Isn't that what Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael did? They let their light shine in this dark place called Babylon. They're going to be there for 70 years. Daniel is probably going to sit in his place Nebuchadnezzar gave him for probably, 70, 80 years. Some speculate he's around 90 years old when he dies, maybe later 80s. Daniel's been there 70 years. And he's influenced Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to influence the Persians as well when they come and rule. But notice, God ultimately is going to have his rule. That rock representing the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And that kingdom, and go back to chapter 2. Go back to chapter 2 real quick. And look at what he says in verse 45. As much as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. That the dream is certain, its interpretation is sure. What he's saying there is, the kingdom of Christ is going to stand. Nebuchadnezzar, yours is going to be destroyed. And that's true today. We have the kingdom of Christ with us today. When we have the rule of Christ, which is his word in our hearts, he's ruling our hearts, and the kingdom is with us today. This story is so powerful. I bet there are things that you can tell me about this. If there's something about this story that you like and that you can tell me about it, next time you see me, come to me and tell me something about this story. Tell me what you learned from this story. And if I missed something, share that with me. Help me see more about this story. I just love this story. It helps me so much. And I hope it helps you. I want you to know that Jody and I love you. And we always look forward to seeing you. And we're always, always, always encouraged when we see you come in the door. And so, you stay safe and stay healthy. And God will protect you. You have a good day. And enjoy your life. Bye-bye.